Good afternoon, everybody. Got a bunch of people looking to jump on. So we're just going to stall for another minute or two, and we'll be getting started here any second. Thanks for everybody today's Street Talk. All right, guys, I think we've waited long enough. So welcome everybody to today's Street Talk Live special series. We started this, last week, and we're really looking forward. We got some great topics, so I hope everybody's had an opportunity to see the future agenda, to see exactly what we're going to be covering in these series, and you guys can jump on as you like. So, a couple things to let everybody know about. We've had several questions and several inquiries about seasonal merchants. So before we get started on this training, I just wanted to go over that. So obviously, in light of the situation the world's in, for that matter, there's several merchants that have unfortunately had to shut their doors down. So something we've been able to get approved with both of our banks is to allow basically what we call seasonal merchants the ability to take advantage of that seasonal freeze, even though obviously it's not really seasonal, it's more circumstantial. So for any of the Deutsche Bank through Evo deals, we can simply just take an email. If you guys let us know what merchant needs to be, on temporary seasonal freeze, and we will zero out all their fees, and then it's for a maximum of 3 months for that. Okay. The front end will be shut down, so they won't be able to process in that window. So make sure you be wary of that, that if they plan on doing minimal processing, this is not a good solution for them. They will not be able to process during this freeze period. And then it's up to them to let you guys or us know that it's time for them to be reactivated. On the Wood Forest side, similar, but a little different. There is some minimal expenses. It basically equates to about $12, $13 a month for the merchants that are being suppressed. They also do require an addendum. You can get those from our partner portal, or you could email sales team or partner support, and they'll be happy to get you that Wood Forest seasonal merchant addendum. You will need that addendum signed both when you request to activate that freeze, as well as when it comes time to reactivate that merchant. So like I said, in both banks, it is a 3-month max. So that should be plenty of time. I'm sure, cross your fingers, God forbid, we're still in a bit of a mess 3 months later. I'm sure there could potentially be some adjustments to that. But I think we're all pretty optimistic that 3 months should be plenty. So lastly, before we get started, guys, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to just type those right in the Q&A section at the top of your Zoom meeting. I've got a couple of my colleagues standing by to answer those as I'm going through. So, and if there's any I need to answer directly, I'm sure they'll pass my way. So we encourage questions. We really appreciate everybody being on today, and hopefully this is some good information. Integrations these days is kind of it has to be a norm almost. I'm sure there's plenty of people on the call, so I can see some of the names, some of the veterans on the call that used to remember when, credit card processing was simply just a credit card terminal, a dial-up terminal. Everything was so much easier. Occasionally you'd walk into a POS system, but that was about it. And those were all direct, easy integrations. And, obviously, a lot of people anticipated this. I'm sure a lot of people on the call, but as the world gets more sophisticated, as you know, technology advances, as the business owner demographic kind of gets younger and a little bit more agile, you know, all these different systems and softwares and complex payment platforms just all come into play all of a sudden, right? And it's just kind of a new world that we're all living in. So, so hopefully today, you know, I've taken what I've learned through the years I've been, you know, working in this industry, and try to break it down really simplistic to its basically key components that you essentially can fill in the gaps and know exactly where it needs to go. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. So what are the key components, at least Jeff's key components to a processing platform? The first is pretty simple. It's a point of sale. Now, when I say point of sale, a lot of people automatically jump to a POS system, but I'm speaking in more general terms. The next step would be what I call a setup protocol. The next step would be what processing network that platform ultimately is required. And with this simple equation, this tells us the specifics we need to know with each and every deal. Because what do we really want to know as sales partners? Number one, we want to know what specific application and bank this particular software needs to go on. We need to know any extra addendums that may be needed as a result of this setup. And if there's any devices that need to be also ordered in addition to the application. So let's break these down independently a little further. So a point of sale, like I said in the beginning, this is not necessarily just a point of sale system. This is a very basic, the beginning of all credit and debit transactions. This is either the physical or the digital entry point of all the credit card information. So no matter what happens, there has to be a point of sale. You know, just for kind of example purposes, I break these up into three basic categories. There's the traditional terminal, which I'm sure people are very familiar with. There's the actual POS system. And there's e-commerce / gateways, right? So let's look at these individually. A traditional terminal, it comes in various shapes and sizes. They come in dial-up, Ethernet, or Wi-Fi, or wireless. The key differentiation between the Wi-Fi and the wireless is the wire. And what I mean is the power cord. So most terminals plug directly into the wall and they can't be moved from there, but they could still process over a Wi-Fi line, just like an Ethernet line. Very common. Dial-up these days are few and far between. Believe it or not, there's still a lot of merchants who still use dial-up, but those are, you know, rare these days. And a wireless terminal can utilize kind of a cellular signal or a Wi-Fi signal, but the key component with the wireless terminal is it has a battery in it, therefore it doesn't need to be plugged in. We can provision just about any terminal that you need. When we start getting into the POS integrations, a lot of times, we have to special order a particular device in order to, fulfill that processing platform. But for a traditional terminal type, the good news is we really provision the full line, and we keep them all in stock of the three biggest brands: Deja Vu, Verifone, and Ingenico. Well, maybe not the biggest, but one of some of the most well-known. I also encourage you to check out our partner portal. It has a list of more detail about these particular companies' devices we have, and some others as well. The next is a POS system. This is really the root of what I'm sure a lot of people on this call are looking to get some information on. POS systems, the main difference, just to be crystal clear, is payments is only a small portion of what POS systems really manage. They have several administrative, marketing elements, in order for the merchants to run their business. These serve as the register that actually rings up the goods or services that's being sold. But it also helps in kind of inventory and time clock management. It links into the accounting. It does tons of things for this business. But really all we're interested in or able to work with is the payment portion of that, okay? And the fact is that most of the time, not always, merchants already have a POS in place, or at least in mind maybe, right? Now we do resell some POS systems that I encourage you to take a look at a partner portal there too, to see which POS systems we actually resell, brand new, right? But this meeting's about integrations, not, POS resales. So a couple things to point out is that one of the things that's great about working with EPSG is that since most merchants already have a POS system in place, that's the reality. I'm talking 90% already do. In order to be successful as a sales partner out there in the field, you need to be able to say yes as much as you can, right? If you were pigeonholed with an individual processing network like TSYS, you could only work with POS systems that work with TSYS. One of the things EPSG really prides himself on is that we're a systems integrator. We're a network integrator. We work with tons of front ends, and it really shines in situations like when you walk into a POS system, because pretty much all the POS systems out there, there's definitely proprietary ones out there, but for the most part, we can process and we can link in some way, shape, or form to just about every one of them. That helps you guys, the sales partner, simply say yes more. Nothing's more frustrating than having a merchant that is ready to do business with you, and then your hands get tied because the POS system or the software that they're using cannot be integrated with. It still happens, but one of the things, the key, advantage working with EPSG, at least in my eyes, is that we give you the opportunity to say yes more. Some of the popular ones that we process with and are able to integrate with, RPower, Micros, it's recently been bought by Oracle. NCR is another real popular one. A lot of the POS systems we can do. And the fact about POS is it's a very fragmented market. There's literally thousands of them out there, okay? And good news is, because we're a systems integrator, we can definitely look into a lot of them. So next point of sale example is e-commerce or gateways. And so what I mean by e-commerce and gateways are basically any of these transactions that are processed electronically over the internet, okay? This could come in the form of a website where the customer initiates that transaction. Think about like an Amazon or something like that, where you as the card holder goes on, fills your, your shopping cart or whatever it might be, and you actually put your credit card information in there and process that credit card. That is an e-commerce transaction, okay? But also payment gateways, can also work just on a merchant's PC as well. So as I stated, the e-commerce sites, the merchants need to kind of we're not a website developer, right, guys? So we don't build sites. What we do is link into them, okay? So one of the ways you deal when you're dealing with the merchant that either is an e-commerce strictly or has some elements of e-commerce to their business is you simply ask them, ask their web developer or what software their website is built on, what gateways that software is integrated with. There's usually a list of those, and we resell probably 8 different ones. And most of the time, one of ours are integrated with that website. Then the answer to the equation is pretty easy, right? But also, like I mentioned, gateways could also be on their own PC. It can facilitate many types. One-time payments, very simply, electronic invoices, reoccurring billing, e-checking are just some of the options gateways offer. Gateways are almost like their own POS software in a sense, in a digital world. So gateways are very powerful, and in my eyes, they're basically the way of the future. Everything is turning into this gateway in this middleware world, and utilizing these cloud-based storage facilities inside these gateways to really facilitate several different types of processing methods. Some of the ones that we sell that we really like, Authorize.net, USA ePay. We recently partnered up with WinCave as well, which is an excellent one, NMI, and several others. So I encourage you to go check out Partner Portal and see what we have to offer as well, for those who haven't had a chance to see. So those are the 3 forms of point of sales. So now let's talk about that infinity sign that we saw in that first equation. And that's what I call a setup protocol. So a setup protocol is any and all information, both technical and otherwise, that's needed to bridge that point of sale to the processing network, okay? This whole integration piece is about the bridges connecting these 2 and 3 different options, from the point of sale all the way to the back end for the merchant to get funded. Some basic examples of a setup protocol is a var sheet, or variable sheet, var sheet for short, and what we call a middleware. So let's break these down individually, just so we're all on the same page. First is a var sheet. It's also known as a parameter sheet. This is the most simple way to integrate into a software. This is simply a list of variables, hence the var sheet. And the merchant software company, whether that be a e-commerce website type of setup, or it be a point of sale a POS system inside of a restaurant or retail location, the installer can simply go within the guts, so to speak, of that software and just replace the current variables with EPSG's variables. That saves, and then now all those transactions are now being pushed to EPSG's processing bank rather than the competitors that was in there previously. So var sheets are most used for direct integrations into processing networks, which are a thing of the past, okay, but there's still some lingering out there. Non-EMV POS solutions, and we'll explain why here in a little bit. And also sometimes you might have a merchant, sometimes they're the bigger ones, that they already have a middleware or a gateway in place that they actually own, okay? So when that's the case, we can provide a simple variable sheet, and then they can update our variables inside that gateway or middleware that's already in place. Something to be very careful about in those situations is that what does happen from time to time is that the merchant might think they own that gateway, but in reality, the competitor provisioned that gateway for them. So normally when they find out the details on that is after they close their old merchant account with the competitor and they shut down their gateway. So it's a great path, and it makes our life and your life much easier, but you want to make sure and double check and make sure that the merchant is being charged for that gateway or middleware separate from their credit card processing, and to be sure that it's a merchant owned account and not a reseller provisioned account. Very important to kind of do that. But once you kind of come to those determinations, to hear that it's just a var sheet is a great thing to hear when you're a sales partner, right? Because then there's no extra paperwork needed. There's no extra device needed. It's as simple as what we call a stage only var sheet. It's a simple document that gets transferred to the installer or the provider, whoever that may be, and they can link it together, and boom, they're off to the races and processing with you. So unfortunately, those are few and far between. The much more common is a middleware, okay? So middleware is a general term that's basically a third-party software company that has already went and certified with the processing networks, a litany of them. Then they turn around and offer a very developer-friendly integration on the POS and software side. So they serve as that bridge to connect that point of sale to the network without the variable sheet. So here's some important things to know about middlewares, okay? Like I already mentioned, they're very integration friendly versus a direct integration. Usually if all the parties are motivated, these things can be done in days, maybe a week, 2 weeks, as opposed to direct integrations that have been known to take 6 months to a year. And no front ends are really even offering direct integrations anymore anyway. So it's pretty much the only way developers have now moving forward, and have been for a while. This does provide somewhat of a universal network integration. So if that middleware had integrated with 2, 3, 4 front ends, then in theory, you have all 4 of those front ends as options, which can be very helpful in some situations. Not all features are perfect from network to network, so it's nice to have different options. Also, almost all POS systems that process EMV use middleware. Not all, but the majority. And we're going to talk about that in depth. It's called a semi-integrated solution. We'll talk about that and why that is here very shortly. Also, something to take note is that there is almost always extra fees and paperwork that are required when a middleware is required, okay? Sometimes it's a transaction fee, sometimes it's a setup fee and a monthly, sometimes it's less than that, but dependent on that, right? Also, e-commerce middleware is always an internet gateway, right? There's lots of middlewares out there that only serve POS software companies, right? So they don't have an e-commerce solution. They're not a gateway, but they're similar in structure, right? They're still connecting that point of sale to the front end network, okay? Here are some of the partners we use. Spin is a Deja Vu product. DataCap, NetEPay, probably a lot of you heard of NetEPay. That's a DataCap solution. And USAEPay, USAEPay is unique in the sense that they're very big in the e-commerce integration game, but they also have some card present integrations as well, where they serve more as a middleware and not a gateway. So these companies are very much so kind of meshing a little bit together. And I think the future kind of looks more like a one-stop shop for both card present and e-commerce. But there is still a bit of a division with the middleware companies these days that are at least heavily in use. So let's talk about those semi-integrated solutions, okay? So this only applies to card present EMV. That's it. This has nothing to do with e-commerce or MODO, what they call, right? And it's also exclusive with POS systems. That's the only ones that use these semi-integrated solutions. And essentially, what a semi-integrated solution does is it abandons the embedded swiper that the older POS systems always relied on. So if you think about it logically, it's much more cost effective for a POS company. If you think about a big company like Micros, right? If they've got, hundreds of thousands of units out there in the field, and now EMV comes up, and they all have embedded swipers that read the magnetic strip on the back of the card. To think that you're going to, first of all, create a new Micros monitor with an EMV device embedded, and then you're going to turn around and replace all those units would be a very cost ineffective approach to accepting EMV on your Micros. So what POS systems have done has done this semi-integrated solutions. So basically, in a nutshell, what it does is it takes a combination of a traditional terminal and it connects to the POS system via a middleware. As I stated before, it's a much more cost effective for the POS companies versus updating their embedded readers. That middleware, again, provides that bridge. Keep that word in mind, bridge. That's what all integrations are about, is creating these bridges between two different technical systems. So what a semi-integrated solution does is allows your POS system to ring up that service or goods, and the total is $25. The middleware then, that $25 price then passes through that middleware and then populates on the traditional terminal sitting next to the POS system. Now that traditional terminal with an EMV reader can take that transaction and then reply back through that middleware back to the POS system. And now with that combination of the middleware and the traditional terminal creates that semi-integrated EMV secure, compliant processing platform. Very important. It's pretty much all what all POS systems have done, with very few exceptions to that. Another really important factor to understand is that the POS company picks the terminals, the middlewares, and the networks that they choose to certify. Unfortunately, we get a lot of calls in from even some of our best sales partners that say, you know, I have a bunch of these terminals in my trunk. Can I use these for this restaurant's POS? And the answer is probably not. We are at the mercy of whatever that software, whatever that point of sale system chose for their integration path, okay? So if the only thing they have is an $800 terminal, then guess what? That's the only option you have. There's no getting around it. They dictate it, not anyone else in the process. Something to keep in mind. And also another little caveat is most of the time we can deploy terminals on our own. Sometimes with these semi-integrated solutions, from time to time, the terminal does need to come from the middleware company directly. That has to do with a core load, technical stuff that I don't really totally understand, to be honest with you. But from a sales perspective, those particular devices need to come from them, and it's a different encryption code than we have on ours. So here's kind of like a little illustration here that traditional terminal communicates with a middleware like DataCap, NetEpay, which then translates back and forth with that credit card terminal. That's a semi-integrated solution. So this is all part of that setup protocol. So that setup protocol is a broad topic, right? You have a front-end solution and some details about what that setup details need to be in order to connect to that processing platform up front. I'm sorry, processing network. So let's talk about that key part of this processing platform, or key component. The processing network is the last step in the front-end processing platform. From my perspective, that's the most important part in the salesperson's life when it comes to these integration pieces. At the end of the day, you need to be able to diagnose what type of setup protocol and what front-end network these POS systems, and we're here to help, by the way, but up front so that we don't have problems when it comes time to install that deal, right? Very, very important. And to really break it down, the processing network is essentially the ingestion point into the processor. Okay, so that credit card data is collected on that point of sale, whatever the point of sale is, a terminal, a website, a gateway, a POS system, whatever it is collected there. Ultimately, whatever path that thing goes down, it has to eventually speak the language of the processing network. Very, very important. So here are some specifics about processing networks. For our purposes, this network ultimately answers which bank and application needs to be used. If you recall back to one of the first slides, so that's what we really want to know as salespeople. What application do I need to put this merchant on, and what different paperwork and hardware do I need for this integration? Also, that network is decided by that same point of sale software certification, and it's not up to us, just as I was explaining earlier. Also, keep in mind that different networks carry different transaction costs for you, the agent. If you reference your Schedule A, you'll notice that there's lots of different transaction fee costs. Evo versus TSYS versus Global versus First Data, and there's several front ends, carry slightly different, couple penny and a half here difference on our Schedule A as a company, which obviously passes on to you guys as a Schedule A as a sales partner. So how are these networks applied to the applications? So some of you might be asking yourself right now, Jeff just said, the front end dictates the application that needs to be submitted for that merchant. As I stated before, at EPSG, we do pride ourselves in the fact that we're not just a credit card company, we're a network integrator, okay? And what distinguishes us is the multitude of bank relationships we've been able to develop over the years. This gives us access to a multitude of front ends and different combinations of front ends to do what we said earlier, simply say yes more. The result, unfortunately, is several different applications to their respective banks. Something you'll learn pretty quick is that when you have a BIN with a bank, they dictate the merchant application. And we have some input on that, and we can make adjustments and try to make them as uniformed as possible. But we are at the mercy of those banks. So what makes us strong sometimes can make it a little more confusing on the back end. But I put together a little bit of a chart here that tells you how this works. So for our Deutsche Bank relationship, that supports the EVO front end, the TSYS front end, and the Global Payments front end. They used to actually do Payment Tech, but they stopped boarding on Payment Tech. Some of the vets on the call, remember that. We also recently stood up a relationship with Merrick Bank and our own BIN with TSYS. So that's going to be a big plus as well. And that's a different application as well as the Wood Forest application that both has a Fiserv First Data relationship as well as another TSYS relationship. The First Data, some of you know that they actually have about 4 or 5 front ends. They have a North, Nashville, Omaha, and Bypass. And we won't bore you with all those details, but we have access to all of them. And we have a very skilled tech team that knows when to use and when not to use these particular front ends. So let's go back to this equation that we started from. And we hopefully didn't bore you with all the details. But this is something I always think about in my head, and I always have as soon as I kind of learn this, is this simple equation. And it all starts with the point of sale. That's why I call it the independent variable, just like back in your algebra days, right? You have your independent variable that's going to dictate the dependent variables, okay? That setup protocol is going to depend on that point of sale, and the processing network is going to depend on that combination of point of sale and setup protocol. So let me go through a couple examples of what I mean here. So let's go with a real simple one first, point of sale. Deja Vu Z8, this is just a traditional terminal. For those who don't know, this is just the most basic type of dial-up or IP terminal you can have. I'm sure a ton of you have seen it out there at your local gas station or retail space, whatever it might be. It's very common. These are at the low end of the complex equations here, right? The setup protocol is basically nothing to it. This is an EPSG built file. Therefore, there are really no takeaways that you're going to need to do. It's just simply the Z8 with a couple of the feature options within it, and we build the file, and we're off to the races. We also board 100% of our Deja Vu terminals, or pretty much 100% of them, on the EVO front end. So now we have the DB Deutsche Bank application done, right? So this equation is pretty simple. All I'm going to need is a Deutsche Bank application, and I'm not going to need any extra addendums in order to have a processing platform. Like I said, a pretty simple example of that. So let's go to a little bit more complicated example. Say RPower POS, okay? Very common restaurant POS out there. A lot of you probably have it. We actually have a partner local on Long Island who's a reseller of this, and we place a lot of business. We know RPower well, but it is a national product, and there's lots of merchants out there that use RPower. For this particular example, this merchant is not interested in EMV, right? However, we know from experience that NetEPay is the middleware for RPower. Now, it's nice through experience, you'll learn some of these details and know them, but I'm not asking everybody to just memorize this. We have this information, guys. We have the teams, we have the support teams in place to help you diagnose these. But with NetEPay and non-EMV, we know that's certified on global. So again, that's going to require a Deutsche Bank application. And now we have an extra takeaway. Now we need a NetEPay addendum, because we know the RPower terminal, the RPower POS system with a non-EMV setup works on NetEPay, and it's certified on global. So now the answer to that equation is Deutsche Bank application, NetEPay. So that tells you, the sales partner, to go back to that merchant, or when you're there, to say, fill out this application, not the Wood Forest one, the Deutsche Bank, right? And also fill out this NetEPay addendum. And then when that's finished and approved, you're going to have the proper setup protocol to be able to install that deal properly. Another example would be like a ShopKeep POS. Pretty popular. You see them out there. Not tons of them, but you do. They also have a great e-com platform as well that we work with as well. But for this example, we're talking about their POS system. So in this case, they're using the NetEPay semi-integrated solution. If you recall, that's that device, middleware, POS. So now you as a sales partner says, okay, I got to remember, I need a NetEPay addendum, and I'm also going to have to get new VX805s. That's the certified device for this software. Again, information we have and we can furnish to you in the event that you run into one of these. We also know that through this one, we certify on First Data. First Data is the front end processing network that ShopKeep chose to certify their EMV solution to. Okay, so what's the answer to the equation? Wood Forest application, NetEPay addendum, and I'm going to need to get VX805s for however many stations that they have. Now the merchant has an option to buy those. They can do a terminal placement. You can lease those peripherals to them, whatever it might be. You know that has to be addressed, come hell or high water. So last, we're going to look, because we've been talking a lot about card present, let's talk about e-commerce. So if I had a merchant that had a website and they were looking for processing, I would simply ask them, what is your website built on? Merchant says WordPress. Say, great. WordPress is a really well-known web building software out there. We use it all the time. In fact, we use it for our website. We know that auth.net is an integrated gateway in there. It's also always, if you're not familiar with the name of that software, you can always ask them to ask their developer, what gateways are you integrated with? They'll normally hand you a list of 3, 4, 5, 6 of them that they are. In this case, it's auth.net. We know that anytime when it's possible, we place auth.net on global. So therefore, that's a Deutsche Bank application. So here's our takeaways. I need the Deutsche Bank application, and I'm going to need an auth.net addendum. But since it's e-commerce, I got no device I need. I got no extra paperwork other than these addendums. But this addendum, the application, and obviously the supporting documentations. So a couple key takeaways that I hope you guys take with you today. It all starts with the point of sale. That dictates the rest of the equation. We used to always have a saying, what is terminal situation? I used to tell my reps when I was building sales teams, they would always call me with questions. The first question I would always ask them is, what is the terminal situation? Now, it's evolved a little bit. It's not just terminals anymore. The real question is, what is the point of sale we're talking about here? Please tell me. Is it an e-commerce? Is it a POS? Is it a traditional terminal? Is it a combination of the two, which is also common these days? Very important, because that's going to lead to my next question. Also, the reality is that there are many combinations that quickly grow exponentially. If you could see some of these matrices that JP and Ian and their teams put together for all these intricate combinations of this software works here and this software works there and blah, blah, blah. And it can be really, mind blown. But we've got a good grasp of it. So you got a good partner to help you with that. Also, I want to point out that everything we've been talking about in this meeting today has been technical. And you probably noticed some of the redundancies of the networks our bank relationships take. For instance, TSYS is accepted by all 3 of our bank relationships, right? This meeting was about technical integration, so that's what we focused on. But the fact is that there's factors like cost, like we did mention on your Schedule A cost, access to that merchant's back-end information, and features that help narrow down the best options when there's several options available, okay? The good news is that we feel like we have mastered these different options. And we're also working on a great tool that we're going to hopefully add to our partner portal here very soon. That's going to take this equation into perspective. That's going to allow agents like you to be able to log right on, pick that front end, pick the point of sale, because right, that's where everything starts. Sift through the multiple options that might be available for that point of sale or that device, whatever it might be, and ultimately come up with the right answer to the equation, which is going to arm you with the right smart app, the right extra paperwork. You combine that with a full package for underwriting, and you're never going to have to go back to a merchant and get a new form signed. And like I've mentioned several times, good news is I know sometimes this can get confusing, but all of our support representatives, our technical support and our sales support representatives are very versed on these options and what to do and how to place them. So we encourage you guys to come in or come in, and that's fine once you're able to, but also feel free to reach out to us via email or anything that might be with a specific question. Guys, sales team, I have a merchant that's processing with an Aloha terminal. They want to do business with me. What do I got to do? Well, we'd be more than happy to coach you through how to do that. Also, this training is going to be available on Partner Portal for the Street Talk Live section that's about to be launched here very soon. And you'll be able to reference this at any point and hopefully work through that. We're also going to build on other trainings and hopefully that link this all together. So with that being said, as you can see, we do have some questions. If anybody has any, at least, please feel free to put those in now. We'll get those answered, or at any time, email sales team for this questions or questions on anything. We're here to support you guys, whether we're in a crisis or not. And we want to be that ear for you and that support team for you. Even though we're all working remotely, we seem to be really hitting on all cylinders. So we encourage you guys to please make sure you reach out anytime you need. So unless there's any other questions, that's going to wrap up today's Street Talk. We really appreciate, hope everybody's being safe out there. And hopefully this chaos will be coming to an end really soon. And I encourage you guys to take this opportunity to sharpen your saw when you have the opportunity. I would like to think that even some of the veterans on the call picked up a couple things, maybe connected a couple dots today. I encourage you to connect as many dots as you can while the times are a little slow, and you'll be primed and ready to be a real force out there when this chaos is over. So thanks again for everybody coming into Street Talk. Please, next Tuesday, 3 o'clock, we're going to have another great topic for you as well. Thank you very much.